Well, the liberal psychosis that has been going off non-stop for the last couple of weeks seems to be just constantly escalating and scaling up, especially with that Red Hood writer who decided to call Charlie Kirk a Nazi shortly after his execution, going out there and fully denigrating him, and then losing her job at DC. Well, now she's under the impression that what she did does not constitute being fired because Neil Gaiman is still being sold. Even though Neil Gaiman hasn't been writing anything for DC, hasn't been writing anything for anybody, and is basically not employable at the moment, as all of his contracts have been cancelled. But of course, to her, the fact that Neil Gaiman's works are still being sold is utterly ridiculous, utterly irredeemable, and needs to be stopped. And that's why they should re-employ her, because the biggest crime you can commit against DC is being trans. She thinks she was fired for being trans. Or maybe he. I don't know. It's a gender-confused goblin. This person legitimately believes the only reason they were fired was because they're trans. And they can't conceive of any other reason that DC would get rid of them. Because how dare they get rid of her, but keep selling books by people who aren't trans. That she considers to be sex criminals. And yes, I mean, there is some evidence that Gaiman is. And some of the other people she mentioned as reason why he should still be employed, it's honestly just baffling. And this woman is just peak delusion. It just goes to show, mental illness may be not the best thing to focus on when you want to keep somebody gainfully employed. Especially when you don't want them having a Blue Sky account and being able to write stories for you. Maybe the reason your story was cancelled was, this is issue 1, you've never written anything beforehand, this is your first comic book, and then you immediately celebrated terrorism. Maybe that's why. Just a thought. But before we go any further, like, subscribe, and let's get into this. So coming from batting into the comics, Red Hood writer criticizes DC firing standards. You can still get Neil Gaiman's work through them. But the head writer, Gretchen Felker Martin, has criticized how the publisher was exceptionally fast to not just cancel, but fully recall the only published issue of Red Hood Volume 2, but not offer a similar response to a number of other uncouth creators. She has written one story, they published the first issue, and they were about to publish issue 2. They recalled all of issue 1 and canceled all publications of issue 2. So just 2 books, just 2 trades, just 2 paperback floppies were what were canceled. That's it. That's all that they recalled and didn't ship, compared to everything she's about to say for the whataboutism. Now, those of you lucky enough to have missed this story, this is one of the most disgusting things somebody said. After the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Gretchen went on and said, "Thoughts and prayers, you Nazi bitch. Hope the bullet's okay after touching Charlie Kirk." Now, I figured I'd real quick try and find Gretchen's real name, because there is no way in hell somebody willfully chose to be called Gretchen as their chosen transgender name. And I was trying to figure out exactly what Gretchen actually is. But looking at him, or her, it's impossible to tell because they're so fat that they just pass. This person is very unfortunate, and I understand fully why they might have chosen the name Gretchen. But you know what they say, ugly faces, ugly hearts, and everything seems to show what you are. The outside is the same as what you are on the inside. But a few hours after that gloriously horrific Blue Sky post, whatever the hell they're called, local comic book stores across the United States, as it was the only country in which the book had officially been published, received a message from DC informing them that not only was Jason Todd's latest solo series, which had just hit shelves that day, no longer moving forward, but they were also offering full refunds via credit for both their remaining copies and those which they had already sold. Now, if only I could have gotten a copy, not because I'd want to read it, hell no, but because I'm sure this might be worth something one day when people go to look at how bad it probably was. Pressed by multiple news outlets, including Popverse and The Hollywood Reporter, the details on the move, a spokesperson for the publisher simply stated, "At DC Comics, we place the highest value on our creators and community and affirm the right to peaceful individual expression of personal viewpoints. Posts or public comments that can be viewed as promoting hostility or violence are inconsistent with DC's standards of conduct." And let's be very clear, because everyone's going to scream about it, this is not cancel culture. Gretchen was not canceled. What is happening is Gretchen celebrated terrorism, Gretchen praised terrorism, and was therefore perpetuating terrorism. By calling Charlie Kirk a Nazi, you are saying that anyone with even remotely close views to him is also a Nazi. Ergo, you don't deserve public discourse because you are labeling things and justifying terroristic action. On Discord, Felker recalled, "It was surreal. I got a call from Warner Bros. Exact at 10:30 p.m. She yelled at me. They did very much want a groveling apology. I told her I wasn't going to apologize for calling a Nazi, that he'd spent his life trying to kill Everyone I love, and I had no regrets. Yes, Charlie Kirk, the mass murderer, the person who was known for murdering people with words and a microphone. Yes, he took the microphone and he beat people over the head with them. Yes, he was definitely trying to murder everyone you know by trying to establish a system of care that prevented those you know and care for from committing suicide, as 44% of your community is going to do. Felker had a similar psychological mental breakdown on her Patreon, where she went on to say that Kirk was funded by the country's richest and most powerful, feted by the president Donald Trump as a whip that kept the youth in vote in line and worked them into a frenzy on Trump's behalf. Yes, he used the whip of rhetoric and logic and thinking your problems through and coming up with logical answers. This gave him power. This made his words cut flesh and snap bone. There's no separation between Kirk's rhetorical violence and the violence carried out on his behalf by both the government apparatuses and by disturbed lone actors whose sickness he gleefully stoked in hopes that it would burst forth into the showers of blood. Yes, I remember greatly when Charlie Kirk said that we should all go out there and stab our local tranny. That is 100% what Kirk said and what he believed. I'm so glad that you are illuminating us to this wonderful truth. All by simply asking for people to prove him wrong and for people to change his mind. His entire thing was change my mind or I'll change yours. And they had polite discourse. In fact, Charlie Kirk is one of the most accepting of different people. He has accepted several trans people before. He specifically kicked somebody out of a TPUSA event for not wanting gay people in the movement. And yet, yeah, you're totally right. He has encouraged mass genocide by just having conversations and spreading rhetoric. Well, I'm sorry, babe, if the rhetoric is going to cause any genocide. Is it wrong? If rhetoric, if truth, logic, and, well, truth, as I just said, is all it takes to justify killing a lot of people, I'm not saying he's right, but under your framework here, you're not painting yourself in a very good picture. Also, only one side decided to shower anybody with another person's blood, and it wasn't Charlie Kirk's. No, it was Charlie Kirk's blood that was showered onto other people because of the rhetoric and the violent rhetoric that you yourself are posting right now, and that's why you were fired. But, Gretchen continued, his hopes are now splattered across the backdrop of a gaudy little pavilion under banners reading, "Prove me wrong," but in his own sick language, Kirk was proven right. He seized his power, used power, and effected great change in the world around him through the force of his desire for violence. He died as he lived, twisting statistics to lie about minorities and hope that others would murder them on his behalf. Yes, murder. That's what he was pining for. He wasn't opining that maybe we should encourage societal change. He wasn't saying maybe we should address the problem so we can prevent it from being perpetuated in the future. No, all he wanted was murder. You figured it out, Gretchen. Round of applause for your big brain. Where maybe this guy who spent his entire life trying to find solutions, obviously, according to you, is nothing more than just a route to try and get more people murdered. Even though, well, the only statistic you have to say that right-wingers even commit much violence was fallacious and correlated all Islamic aggression with right-wing aggression and minimized or removed all leftist aggression entirely. And yes, Kirk was proven right because he was the one who was shot. He was the one who was shamefully and disgracefully murdered because of his opinions. He was proven right that maybe the left is the more violent of the two groups, and, well, you're not proving him wrong right now, are you? And what he was shot for when he was talking, it proves it exactly right, pointing out that most of the gun violence is gang-related, is caused by criminality, and has nothing to do with actual gun ownership. But Gretchen continues, 2 days ago I made a glib joke about Kirk's death. It was irresistible to me. I spent years smelling traces of the poison fumes he left in his wake, seeing his sneering face, his mouth full of teeth like baby corns and gums like congealed aspic. I stand with the sentiment of what I said. Kirk was evil. He can no longer hurt us, even if his cruelty will linger like a bad smell for decades to come. What I regret is that I didn't take that cruelty with more seriously in a moment when people were ready to discuss it, to unpack how violence is done and why and at whose behest. Babe, I don't have to be the one to say this because I know everyone's been saying it everywhere, but Charlie Kirk was the moderate position. Charlie Kirk was the one who actually didn't want anyone to die. Kirk was the one who said, please sit down and let's have a conversation. Now I'm seeing actual calls to violence as the result of his assassination. You created a more violent world which you claimed to be opposed to and wanted to prevent. Congratulations. I tried to make my own analysis of it here. To account for class, for race, for sexuality, and political theory, I have not touched upon religion, but the perversion of Christianity by lovers of human suffering and brutalization has reached a fever pitch so deranged and terrifying that its influence on men like Kirk and its influence on it turn should be self-evident to all. She invokes self-evidency so that she doesn't have to prove it, because it's not self-evident. When you look at the way Kirk used Christianity, it was very much the olive branch, the forgive everyone, and you can see that in the beautiful memorial that happened yesterday, when Kirk's wife sat there, Erica Kirk, and said that she forgives the young man, because that is what Christ would call her to do, and that is what Kirk would have called her to do. And aside from that just bafflingly illiterate rant, using every single $5 word that she's ever played in Scrabble, she now, after having her Blue Sky ban lifted, went on to continue talking about it, and this is where the absolute narcissism comes from, where she seems to think she is one of the greatest of the greats, worthy of the same recognition and good faith and goodwill that those like Neil Gaiman receive by these marketers. One thing I'll say about DC not only canceling Red Hood, but recalling the first issue and refunding stores for buying it, is that you can still get Neil Gaiman's work through them. They still work with Otto Schmidt. Eddie Berganza worked there for years after the formation of a policy that no women were to be around him at any time for any reason due to his habitual sexual harassment and assaults. Frank Miller released one of the most savagely Islamophobic comics of all time, Holy Terror, and still works with DC. There are pedophiles, war criminals, confessed sexual predators on staff. You can still buy all their works, being a rude, abrasive loudmouth, while trans is the only unforgivable sin to these people. Yes, Gretchen, the reason why Neil Gaiman is still being printed isn't because he wrote some of the greatest works. No, it's because he's a cis hetero man and he's a sex pest and DC just loves their sex pest. It's not because he put out some of the greatest works to ever enter the comic scene. It's not because he wrote so many, he was such a prolific writer that he could justify several absolute editions with special felt covers. This is Absolute Death, an absolutely fantastic book based on everything I've read, and it is gorgeous art. Your book is nothing but a shit stain on the toilet of obscurity. Nobody cares about your little Red Hood issue number 1. It's your first comic book you've ever written, and nobody cared enough to read it in the first place. It barely broke any market sales. And then, of course, you got there and you denigrate and you celebrate terrorism, and now you're shocked that it's gone? And what about the other men? Because let's be honest, I only know about the issues with Neil Gaiman because I've covered it on my channel before. Most of what is just, the guy's just a sexual pervert. And people weren't happy that they didn't get what they wanted out of the relationship. So what were the crimes of the other artists? Well, Schmidt drew a graphic propaganda comic on behalf of Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. DC continues to commission him for cover work, his most recent gracing the front of this month's Batgirl Volume 6, number 9. So his crime was he took a job and wrote a comic book for the Russians. So he should be barred from ever working when all he does normally is just cover art because he's a good artist. Art Berganza was fired from DC in 2017 following numerous accusations of inter-office sexual harassment, prior to which the aforementioned No Women Around rule was confirmed by Sensational Comics Volume 2 writer Alex D. Campi. His run as an editor on a number of Superman-related titles, including Action Comics Volume 1, Adventures of Superman Volume 1, and World's Finest Volume 1, are still widely available in various trade collections. So this guy worked in DC for a very long time. He was the director on these books, it looks like, did not actually write them. He was the editor. So he edited these books. He didn't write them. He didn't draw them. He wasn't influential aside from making sure there were no typos in these books. And would you look at that? That happened 8 years ago. Great whataboutism you got there. Miller, as noted by Felker Martin, wrote, then drew Holy Terror, a post-9/11 anti-terrorism that presented both the war on terror and Islamic faith as cartoonishly evil from The Dark Knight Returns to its third sequel, 2019 The Dark Knight Returns, The Golden Child. Miller's collected work remains a mainstay of comic book retailers. Your other counter-argument is the most prolific and famous comic book writer for DC to ever have lived? A foundational writer for both DC and Vertigo Comics? That's your argument? My one book should stay because I'm a transgender person who celebrates terrorism, but this guy who said that terrorism is bad, who's made DC more money than I will ever have conceived of, should be just removed because I didn't like his book from 9/11. Yeah, okay, bud. Notice, by Felker Martin comparing herself, I don't care, to these people, to Gaiman, to Schmidt, to Berganza, to Miller, what this person is doing is saying, I am equally as good. Qualitatively, I stand with them. This is my quality and their quality are the same, and the only reason is that they are banishing me is tabula rasa, is that because of my identity, they have to get rid of me. They can't stand the thought of a poor, bleeding heart transgender person who's so glad that this evil man will stop murdering my loved ones, even though he's never killed anyone. None of his followers have ever killed anyone. Nothing he's ever done has caused any deaths, but he's gone, and that protects my community and those I love. That's this person's honest belief, is that they're just as good as the creme de la crop of DC, and the only reason they were fired is because DC's Nazis and they're trans. I'm not trying to read into it, and if you have a different opinion on that, you're welcome to say, but guess what? It doesn't even matter. It's not like DC's doing very good anyway. It's coming from Comic Book Club. Green Arrow comic canceled by DC Comics due to unsustainable sales number. DC Comics are selling so poorly that they're having to cancel all their runs. It doesn't matter if you kept the Red Hook book in, because it's not hooking anyone onto your stories. It's not attracting any new audiences. It's nothing more than gutter trash floppies designed to affirm whatever identity politics DC suffers from. Honestly, the fact that you opened your mouth and got yourself fired is a massive gift to DC, so they can roll back their payroll and maybe start reconsidering their hiring practices. Comics are fully in the gutter. It's a dead industry. They've killed it. They've taken what was once a great thing, something that could allow you to tell all kinds of stories, and then they decided, what if comic books were its own genre? And then they stopped actually writing real stories. They stopped telling the truth and displaying reality and true art. And now that's something that's been left to nothing but the indie scene with companies like Rippaverse and my great friend Von Coleman. You guys should totally check out Phenomenova issue 3. Great books. Not that I've read them. And it's all because of these activist writers, people who put politics above quality, above truth, because they don't believe in truth. They believe that all there is this postmodernist, neo-Marxist post-humanism. That's all they believe in. They believe in the tabula rasa and identity politics. And that's what they're going to push in all their books, and that's what they've been pushing, and that's why nobody is buying their books. But who can be sorry for them? You reap what you sow. You hire these people who don't have any quality, you get them off of Tumblr and off of DeviantArt, and you wonder why their books are just filled with nothing but propaganda and porn, and you wonder why your sales are in the dump. Maybe hire somebody for their quality, for their ability to write, and maybe start looking at people who aren't thoroughly filled with mental illness to the point of calling themselves Gretchen. But that's pretty much what I've got. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this story, and I will see you guys on the next one.